KoitCast! Hi Nancy, welcome to KoitCast.
Thank you so much, Koit.
I was going to say your surname, but like other people, I might struggle with that one. Two turtles and all that, so perhaps I'll gloss over that one, maybe.
I think at least one try is worth it.
Okay, Nancy Du Tertre. I was being I was being rural French then.
Yeah, yeah. The facial expression going with it is perfect.
Thank you. I've worked on that one over a number of months preparing for this. So, Nancy, tell us all about yourself. Who are you, away from, etc. As much or as little as you want to say.
Sure. Well, I mean, yeah, I'll do a very uh, truncated version. So, Nancy Du Tertre. Okay. I live currently in Connecticut in the U.S. I've lived all over the U.S. in my life. I've lived in England, France, and Germany as well. I am, let's see, I have owned and operated many businesses, including French business. I'm an attorney. I'm specialized in securities litigation, still licensed. Do less of that and more of the strange stuff that I finally started getting into and researching, I don't know, a few decades ago. So I am essentially, I'm trained in, I'm going to say, pretty much all of the psychic arts.
Nice.
The only thing, and I was not psychic as a kid. I was not psychic as an adult. I'm just trained into it. With one exception. The one thing that I do 100% naturally is something called medical intuitive work and energy healing work. That I do naturally. I have many friends who are trained into different types, but that I do something I call ooey ooey, which is kind of it's really cool stuff. But anyway, so well, let's see what else have I done. So
Well,
so
I'm
I
gonna
moved.
first off, I'm gonna write down this ooey ooey if I can spell it because I need to get
That's
back to whatever that
right.
is.
Yeah, it's my name for it. It's just sort of, because people generally make fun of woo stuff, so this is like woo woo ooey ooey
Ooey
ooey.
ooey. Yeah, I like
It's
that.
sort of like that, yeah. Um, let's see. I first went into training as a psychic detective for about a decade. I worked in law enforcement. I trained also as a spiritual medium with the Spiritualist Church for a while. I do that. What else do I did paranormal investigations, including some in I believe, you're back in Wales. I had a very interesting experience there in a castle with my kids. So I've done that. I've done a lot of that too, and understand a bit about spirits. I have no problem calling things by their not politically correct names because I what I try to do is desensitize people. I'm really not with all the woke stuff that goes on, I'm not a big fan of let's be like uber polite about everything. Let's just, say what we all understand without the judgment attached.
Bang
So,
on.
thank you. So I refer to things like aliens as opposed to the visitors or, the extra, intra, ultra, multi, whatever. It's just alien seems easier. My husband is an alien. He's French. He's a legal alien, but an alien just means a stranger, to
Yeah.
right. I'll say psychic, which when I first went into this, I discovered a lot of psychics were calling themselves sensitives, which is a like 20th century or 19th century term because it seemed a little bit more intellectual and less, it didn't have the connotations attached, but psychic works fine for me. Same with a spiritual medium. What else? Ghost. A lot of people say, "Oh no, you can't say ghost. You have to say spirit." No, I know what a spirit is. I get it. And a ghost is a spirit, and that works for me. So, and that's to differentiate from other types of spirits. So anyway, so that's what I do. I'm also trained in psychokinesis. I spent some time in Russia training in psychokinesis. That was something I knew how to do. I'd been working with scientists prior to that. I have been affiliated in a sort of strange, unique way with many scientists for many, many years on issues of consciousness. I'm published in some peer-reviewed scientific journals regarding work that I've done on the relationship between psychics and autistics,
Nice.
or shall I say, people on the autistic spectrum. That would be more proper because autistics is another word that seems to have gone by the wayside. At any rate, so that's sort of a really rough, brief summary of what I've been involved in.
That is amazing. And to be fair, there's so many things so many threads there that I could pick on. But I like the way, straight off the bat, that you're talking straight and no BS. We don't need all the flowery guff surrounding it. Talk
Mhm.
straight, get to it, and people appreciate that more. That's what I think, in my personal experience, anyway.
Mhm.
I'm always interested in what drives people. I'm an advocate, if you will, of the nudge phenomenon. There's things in our lifetime, in our past, that have nudged us to where we are today, and I'm keen on understanding what that nudge phenomenon is and how it comes about. So I always ask, what was your introduction to the paranormal? Because I always like to know what pushed you from A to B. So what started it off for you?
Probably for somebody who was a little bit smarter than me, they would have been nudged a lot earlier, but I
You
wasn't.
ignored all the nudges, did you?
Uh, yeah, I mean, I had just a couple of. I mean, the first thing that I would definitely mention would be, and it's something I wrote about. I'm about to publish my sixth book, but this is something I wrote about in a book that I wrote called Psychic Intuition: Everything You Ever Wanted to Ask But Were Afraid to Know. And I talk about I was in training with a group of psychotherapists. I'm not a psychotherapist, but I am certified in intuitive Gestalt psychotherapy. I've done that for about more than 30 years. So I was invited in to attend training sessions, and so I generally kept my mouth shut because I was just a lowly attorney mingling with these people who knew about, psychology. At any rate, it was it was a very interesting session series that we were doing. Uh, the leader of this group, who is a fantastic person, his name is Dr. Ron D'Angelo. He had organized it so that you'd sit in a circle of about, I don't know, 10, 15 people. You'd have one person who would volunteer to be sort of the person who would sit in the chair. And then the leader Dr. D'Angelo would ask a series of very bizarre questions like if this person were an animal, what kind of animal would they be? Where do they live? What's their environment? Where's their family? What do they eat? I mean, it didn't matter what. Or you could turn them into, let's say, a cartoon character or something else. And so he would ask everybody, you would not immediately blurt out your answer, but then afterwards he'd go around the circle and say, and he'd ask everybody. And very often people would come up with not just similar answers, but the identical, very specific imagery. And I thought that was absolutely fascinating. Like the information's floating around in the air, and yet we discount it all the time. At any rate, so there was one day that he had put one of the participants up. I didn't know anything about her. She was of Indian origin from India. She had long black hair. After we were done, she described a little bit about her family, which was a little bit sad, I think, somewhat. There'd been some tragedy in her family. At any rate, while I'm sitting there listening to her, I'm about 3 feet away, maybe 4 feet, and all of a sudden I felt a cool breeze on my right forearm. And I did not know anything about anything paranormal back then. That's fairly common when you've got a spirit in the room. But this, I felt it. I thought, well, gee, that's bizarre. There's no air conditioning. There are no windows open. There's nothing. And then this cool breeze moved in front of me between her and me. And then it went over to my left and stood in front of her. And so I said, could I, because we were about to wrap up, and I asked Dr. D'Angelo, I said, could I ask this question? Weird. He said, well, okay. How weird? I said, yeah, pretty weird. And he said, all right. And I asked this woman, I said, do you happen to know somebody whose name is either Mary Maria or Marie? Um, and she said, yeah, I think I had a secretary by that name a long time ago. I said, no, forget it. Nothing. She said, no, why? I said, well, okay, how about Mary Maria Marie, last name starting with letter S, as in like Sam? Well, no, not really. I said, okay, forget it. Now I was very embarrassed because I'm the only non-psychologist sitting in a group of psychologists are thinking, who is this whack job who's asking these questions? And finally, and she said, why? And I said, okay, fine. And I sort of said, well, look, I felt a cool breeze here. Somebody walked in between us. They're standing right there, right in front of you. And I guess I thought it was maybe your mother who might have passed away. And this woman, and name starting with, Mary Maria Marie, last name starting with letter S, which would be, if you think about it, I felt stupid because I don't know that many Indians from India who have
Oh,
a
yeah,
name
good
Mary
point.
Maria Marie. That sounds like I'd go more to Europe for that. Uh, and so I felt like an idiot, but I said it anyway because I didn't have a choice. And she starts sobbing. And I'm shocked. I don't know why she's sobbing. And she said, no, you're wrong. I said, okay. She said, no, that was my mother's sister. She just passed away in England a month ago and I wasn't able to go to the funeral. I said, oh. And then I started to feel this thing that I had felt, which was like somebody pushing the back of my shoulders, like, do it, do it, do it. And I really didn't want to. And oh, okay, fine. And I said, well, she's standing right there and she just wants you to know that she loves you. And I thought to myself later, if you were going to pretend to be a spiritual medium, wouldn't that be the most obvious thing to say? You know, they
Very
come all
generic,
the way
isn't it?
from
Yeah.
incredibly generic. Why would I say that? I was irritated with myself for saying, but it meant a lot. And anyway, I ignored that entire experience. I don't know what I did with that. It was too weird for me. Didn't know what to do with it. Came out of nowhere. Never had that type of experience in my life. Was never able to verify anything like that. But that started me on to a career my so-called career that I seem to be on, which is
Mm.
explore all realms of consciousness in different manifestations.
But that's a big nudge, isn't it? Because you've gone from it's presumably having no interaction to suddenly and I quote you, you didn't have a choice but to say something or do something. So
Yep.
that's a power outside of yourself forcing you or making you to do an action,
Oh yeah.
which is a big nudge to me. That's what it sounds like.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Where did how did that information come into your head to you had to say it? Did you hear a voice or did you just know and had to say?
There's a thing, and I've also written about this. There are different types of ways you can access psychic information. You can access them through what I'm calling sort of the psychic senses, which are like shadow senses to our actual physical senses. So, in other words, what always bothered me when I was listening to spiritual mediums or people who would get out in front of big audiences. Oh, I see your grandfather standing right behind you. And I'd say, wow, that's a really special person. Because I had to say, I don't see anything. Um, and what I began to realize in most, but not all cases, these people were not seeing with their physical eyes, they were seeing with their psychic eye.
Mm.
So, but the language was all wrong because it mixes us all up. Because when we talk about seeing something, we talk about seeing it with our physical eyes, which means that you got a whole entire population that thinks that psychics are these weird magical people because they see and hear these things that we don't hear. Well, sometimes they can manifest through the actual physical senses, but usually it's knowledge or data that's manifesting through the psychic senses. So when you say, how did I know that? Well, there's one other type of a psychic sense, which is the most mysterious, which means, and they call it stuff like clairintuition, part of the clairvoyance, clairaudience, all those. The information comes automatically and instantly and without any form of sensory or intellectual explanation. It's simply, boom, it's there.
And very weird that is, but it is though, isn't it? Because you just suddenly went from not knowing this person to suddenly saying Marie or whatever her name was with an S, and then say and giving that across. You wouldn't have randomly made that up, like you said, because this person was of Indian
It wasn't,
descent.
yeah, no, no. And I give you, I mean, I have now, having done readings and taught people now for decades on how to do this, because, it's actually an advantage that I come from sort of the other side of the fence. So as I said, I'm just trained into everything. Now I do that stuff. I can do that without that needing that like crazy flash from I don't know where. I am able to access good information that seems to others to come from nowhere. I know how to do it, and it requires not being in your logical brain. And believe me, if you're a logical, analytical person, which I am, that's very hard to do. And that is also why let's say the smartest, the most intellectual people, the most analytic people will be the people who will be most fiercely against acquiring information psychically. They just can't believe it because it doesn't exist for them. They have wiped it out simply by means of their style of thinking, which actually have been published in scientific journals on that topic.
Which then makes it more special for someone like you who also thinks logically, like me, that when this happened to you, you managed to turn that round from a complete disbelief to a let's roll with it and let's do stuff with it.
Yeah, it was so bad. I when during my psychic detective training, it was so bad that we'd be given exercises to do. In fact, we were tracking down missing people. It was usually homicide cases, but not always. And I was getting data that was verifiable afterwards because you get feedback doing this stuff. And I would constantly, I dismissed it. No, it's luck, it's circumstances, it's good guessing, it's this, that, whatever, to the point where it was happening over and over and over. And my teacher, Nancy Weber, is a fantastic psychic detective, and my fellow students were laughing at me. It's like, oh, come on, Nancy. I mean, when are you going to give it up? Finally, but it took me about a decade, maybe over a decade. And I still, I'm constantly checking myself saying, really?
Hmm.
Because it's very weird.
Is it a sort of imposter syndrome? That sort of thing.
Yeah, 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 yeah. That's a good way to
Yeah.
put it. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I get that now with my music and that and with the stuff that I do. And I'm not good enough. It's not me. I'm not. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
It
sure.
sounds the same. Very, very strange thing. Now, obviously, with your logical side and you being a lawyer, how did that help or hinder you in relation to exploring the paranormal topics and that? Are you still that 10-year person to finally accept things, or have you let go now?
See, I've done this enough. I have done literally many hundreds of readings for people. And because I do a style of remote viewing, and I created my own type of remote viewing, even though I'm trained in all the classical remote viewing styles, because I, I, I needed to. Well, the way I put it is, I felt like a horse stuck in the starting gate, It's like,
Mm.
come on, I just want to gallop. I got to get out of here. I don't want to get hung up on, you know, things like ideograms and then breaking down things into groups and segments and what does this mean and what does that mean? And no, I just want to poop. I wanted to get there faster. But then because remote viewing is done through documentation and feedback and scoring. So I'm having, I do virtually all my readings that way now. So I get feedback. And the key to doing any of this kind of work, this is what I teach my students, I mean, is get the feedback. You are teaching your brain which way to think. Because if you automatically dismiss a particular style of thinking or not thinking, you'll never use it again. And the data that could have appeared from that type of thinking will not exist in your world.
Is it the old adage of getting out of your own way? Letting go of the ego? Is that that sort of thing I hear a lot from people?
No, I don't think
Okay,
so.
interesting.
No, I like my ego. It's pretty good.
Quality. Quality. I always hear the opposite to that, by the way, which
Yeah, I
is
don't.
let the ego go, surrender, that sort of thing. But you like yours. I love that.
Yeah, I mean, no, I don't think it has anything to do with the ego. I mean, it has everything to do with the way you think. Now, our egos are usually linked or glued to the way we think.
Mm,
What I have learned is to unglue them. So my ego is still intact. I have no problem with that. And it doesn't interfere with it doesn't interfere with my work because I know that what I am producing, I have no, first of all, I have some control over how to get it. But I have no control as to knowing whether or not it's going to be accurate unless and until I get feedback. So I have to release an expectation, but not my ego. I mean, it would be my ego if I got something really vague and said, yep, that's right, because it's important to me, because I got to be right.
mm.
And that's not the way I am.
That's good. So you're not attached to the answer, so to speak. You're just giving stuff and then going from there on a feedback
Oh, you
loop
would be
basis.
surprised. I've had to deliver information to people that I said to myself, you've got to be an idiot to deliver this information. Why would you say such a thing? It is completely illogical, irrelevant, clearly is not going to apply to this person. And bingo, this stuff applies. And usually, the crazier I think it is, the better the data is.
Can you give me an example of that without giving any
Yeah,
personal
sure.
cases away? Thank you.
No, I do not only, I do most of my private clientele over Zoom, but I also do some face-to-face work here in Connecticut. And so I get walk-ins. I don't know anything about them. They people who kind of walk into the place and sign up. Yeah, I want to go get a psychic reading type of thing. And so I don't know who they are. I get usually their name, and that's it. This person is, so and so. Here they are. If I have a couple of minutes before they walk in the door, I do a form of what I call mini remote viewing. I scribble down, usually in 1 minute, maybe two if I'm lucky, in the neighborhood of, let's say, 7 to 10 bits of data or information. That means absolutely nothing. It's really screwball stuff and it's all over the place. But that's the point. You have to give yourself permission. Because if you don't, you're locked into what you expect already, which is based on what you've experienced already, and
Mm.
you will never go beyond that. And and most of my clients are women. Um, so this one walked in, and so her target issues had to do with typical stuff, romance and professional stuff, and or moving. I forget what it was. And So we went through that. We did the session. At the very end, I said, "Look, I'm going to read you some really crazy stuff that I wrote down here, but what the heck? Sometimes, who knows?" And so I said, "Look, I wrote down the word NASCAR. Now, I think it has something to do with racing, but I've never watched racing. I don't care about racing. I don't know what it is." Okay. But I wrote that down. I think it's racing. So I don't know. Does that have to do with you like something about you as racing or, and this is all written down before I ever meet the woman, by the way. Okay. And her response was, yes, the person who we were talking about in terms of romance, that was his thing. He was totally into racing. However, she also said that she used to work for NASCAR. She races cars, and she is an adrenaline junkie. Now, If you try to put that statistically over, let's say, a general population of American women, it's just never going to pop up. It just won't. It'll pop up in one of like, I don't know, millions and millions. It's just highly, highly, highly unusual statistically.
Yes, no, I completely agree. Yeah.
But it was very specific information. And it was before I ever met her. So there's also predictive capacity. You can grab information from the future and from the past because there is no such thing as time anyway.
Yeah, which is a big thing, isn't it? That messes with people's minds because that's something is very, very, very hard to get in here. I had a conversation with Mike Ricksecker. I don't know if you've ever spoken to him.
I think
He's
so.
written a book on time and how it all, in theory, how it all works in the conjecture of a stacked universe. He calls it, where it's all happening at the same time and there is no time. Again,
Mhm.
hard to explain, but yes, time's a weird thing. Now, I want to circle back to some of the psychic stuff because it's going to play into at the end of this topic that I want to jump onto, which is alien experiences or UFO, UAP experiences.
Mhm.
You've had these encounters in your life, so I've
Mhm.
read.
Mhm.
Would you explain what your first encounter was and what it led to for you, if you don't mind?
I really wonder what my first encounter was. I don't know. Now, as far as I knew logically, I had no encounters. All right. Um, I'll tell you one that, I mean, the most obvious one was when my daughter and I experienced seeing a football field sized boomerang shaped UFO covered in orange lights that was about 500 to 1,000 feet up in the air above us. Now, that was in 2011. And that was so, and then we had sort of this weird contact information that went on for a couple of years. Um, But I think that was the most obvious. That was like, oh, come on. Now, I've seen many, many UFOs flying around the sky. I certainly, I've lived near major airports a lot of my life. I spent 25 years in Manhattan, surrounded by LaGuardia Airport on one
Hmm.
side, and you had JFK not far away on the other. I know what helicopters look like. I know what airplanes look like. I know what satellites look like. I know how they travel. I know what asteroids look, all that stuff. So, but the stuff I see, it has come in a variety of shapes and forms, and they're quite different, which is always confusing. But I think the first thing that if I look back on it, I think I was right. I was driving in France with my husband. We were coming back from, I think it was Saint-Tropez going up to Lyon, and then we had to hang a quick, what you call a left to go over towards Limoges. And you do that left, and suddenly you're in the middle of La France Profonde. I mean, it's really, there's nothing there. And we were there at 4 o'clock in the morning driving. We'd been driving for 12 hours. And it's pitch black. There's nothing going on. You're driving through all these crazy little villages with French signs which have about 10 arrows pointing different directions. And it's very confusing. And you're there. And I noticed that the full moon behind us seemed to be following us over the tree line. And I thought that was, I mean, listen, that's possible, right?
Mm.
Mm, But it was a little peculiar because it did seem to follow us no matter which way we were turning. Now, is that possible? Yes, that's also possible. However, it was getting strange enough that I mentioned it to my husband. And I said, Can you see the that it looks like the full moon? It was a giant white luminescent orb like a full moon, but it was above the tree line. And he was straining his neck, but he was driving, so he couldn't really see it well. And we passed, I know at that point we were driving past the Lac de Vassilière. I can't pronounce it, but anyway, big lake, pitch black, everything. We finally get back to, we get back home. next morning, his brothers are up, and they're all highly skeptical, very religious. And I start to explain what we saw, and my recollection, which is pretty good sometimes, was that my husband was saying, "Oh yeah, sure, she saw it." And I said, "Okay, fine. Would you mind?" I said to one of the brothers, "Would you mind calling up the police in that area near that lake and see if anybody reported anything or anything unusual?" So he did, and of course the French police laughed at him. Oh yes, bah oui, c'était. Anyway, so they explained that it was that what I must have seen were they'd opened up a new nightclub on the other side of this huge lake, and they said they had those those rotating spotlights that shoot up in the air.
Hmm.
Now, I'm not an idiot, and I wasn't born yesterday. I know what those look like. Those are beams from the ground that go up and they spin, and they can hit a cloud and they'll diffuse somewhere up there, or they may stay a little bit sharper,
Or
whatever,
there'll be a Batman sign up there somewhere.
like a Batman sign. That was not what this was. Okay. And I know that. So, uh, of course, the brothers all started laughing. Oh, this is they called this my my disco ovni. Ovni being a UFO in French, meaning discotheque, flying discotheque. That's what they called it. I was a little annoyed. That went on for a few, like a couple decades. Just recently, because my husband's now starting to understand this stuff. We were in a conversation with friends, and he says, "Oh yes, Nancy and I were in France driving in the car, and I saw a UFO." I said, "Wait a second, no, you didn't." He said, "Yes, I did." I said, "Look, you told me at the time you couldn't see it." Long story short, we get in a big argument because I'm fiercely positive because I said, "Look, you even made fun of me with a flying discotheque." No, I did not. That was my brother's. No. Uh, he and we were so angry we couldn't talk for a day. I said, "Why would you not tell me that?" He said, "But I did." I said, "No, you didn't." I said, "All right, how did you see that? Because you were driving." He said, "Because I could see the full moonlight uh, shining on the wires of the phone wires above us, and it moved every time we were going around." And the more I thought about that, the more I thought, well, okay, that's plausible. It's weird that somehow maybe we were blocked from telling each other. And then on second, third, fourth, and fifth thought, I said, well, to myself, well, that's odd. There, there couldn't have been a full moon. Everything was pitch black. So I think that's my very long story to tell you
Hmm.
that I think that that was my first true sort of dawning recollection that I think I saw something then. People have seen me on spacecraft. I've had many people tell me that. I have zero recollection of that, if that's true. I know that I have a capacity not to be seen. I seem to be invisible sometimes. I went once to shake Henry Kissinger's hand, was standing right in front of him, put my hand out, and he didn't see me and turned and walked away. I've had that happen with other people.
But you are there, though, aren't you? You're physically
I
there.
am, as far as I know, I'm there. Yeah. I've had people tell me that I've been seen bilocated across the world and across the country. Um,
So there's something
I,
strange going on with you, then, isn't there, eh?
well, here's what I'm wondering. I'm wondering if when you get into a level of experience of consciousness, because consciousness is, the ultimate huge connective material, let's call it, even if it's spiritual material.
Sure, sure.
You can, when you're, people talk about out of body experience. As far as I know, I never had that. I've never had any of these things. I'm not aware of any of these things. People tell me about these things. Um, I think that, well, I'll tell you another weird experience. Somebody that I've been working with just recently, like a week ago, told me that I think he was thinking about something, and He was sitting outside. He had a some type of a scarf over his lap so that he wouldn't spill his sandwich or something on his trousers. And he said he was listening to some music and he's watching his phone screen on his lap or underneath this scarf, and it's showing the band that was playing. And then he said, and then my face appeared. And then he had this realization that his phone was not on his lap. It was on the table next to him. My husband once heard my and he's very like he's formerly aerospace executive. He's very logical, but he once heard my name being spoken about in an advertisement for something, which had nothing to do with anything. He called me downstairs. He put it, paused it. We recorded this thing. We listened to it maybe 30 times. Now, don't you think it's a little, I mean, I can understand certain names you might mistake. They might have phonetic overtones or whatever.
Hmm.
But Nancy Du Tertre, and that is the Americanized pronunciation.
I did the
Oh,
full French earlier, didn't I? That one.
oh, no, you didn't, you forgot it's Nancy Du Tertre Delmark. So you'd have
I didn't do
full,
the
oh
full.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Sorry. Um, but the point is that some type of consciousness that in some way, maybe, I don't know, subliminally, subconsciously, whatever, I'm I've I've projected out into other space-time locations. I do think people can do that, by the way.
Yeah, it adds weight almost to the are you the main player in the computer game? Because from your perspective, you are because you're now suddenly elsewhere and the main player in other people's. Do you know what I mean? It's a weird thing to explain, but you are everywhere. Now, in my story, I'm everywhere. Is that what we're doing? Or,
No, because in my story, I was always localized. And by the way, here's another weird thing. Almost since I was a kid, people think they know me. I
is that
constantly,
though? Is that though that because you're very personable, right? I can say straight away, as soon as I met you, we're gonna have a good time. We're gonna have a good conversation because almost immediately I felt the wavelength were bang on the same. Is it part that in that you're the sort of person that can make friends easy?
no, I'm an introvert.
Ah,
No, and it has nothing to do with that. I sit down next to people like in an audience, and the person next to me will say, they'll look at me funny, and I'll look at them and just, and they'll say, we know each other, don't we? But where do I know you from? No, we don't know each other. I've had people, I take regular walks and was in a park once, and some guy was coming the other direction. And he stops dead in his tracks as we pass, and he turns and stares at me, like with his mouth sort of agape and everything. And I looked at him like I thought, well, okay, is this like a crazy person or what's going on? And I said, do is it? I didn't. I've forgotten what I said, but it was sort of a blah blah blah. And he said, I know you. And I said, no, we don't know each other. And he insisted. I've had people do that a lot. So I have this contrast of invisibility, which I should be visible on the one hand, and ridiculous visibility, which I should not have on the other hand.
hmm.
So what is that? Is that related to some projection of consciousness, or is that something else?
Yeah, is that relating to, and I had a question on this anyway, is that relating to people reportedly seeing you on the crafts side of things? Is that where their recollection is coming from? Like, oh, they'd seen you there as an example, and then it's hitting them in the real world. We'll call it the real world. I wonder if that's
Oh,
part of
oh,
it.
I see what you're saying. Well, listen, I mean, that's speculation, but yeah, I mean,
Mm,
who knows? That's possible. That's possible. I had somebody tell me that I was a teacher on board one of these spacecraft. Now, do I remember that? No, 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 not at all.
I know, but and my question on this people seeing you on spacecrafts is, I mean, what do we make of that? Because as again, as from my perspective as a logical person, is that the person telling you that trying to insert themselves into a story, or is there credible weight to their story? And if
Right. And
so, what how does that make you feel?
understood. And I would generally dismiss it immediately on that basis, except it's happened multiple times. So then I got to say, okay, that's a slightly different situation. So what is that? Why would somebody assume that about me? Now, being in the field that I'm in, I do have some amount of public exposure,
Hmm.
but these people who are recognizing me, they clearly, they're not connecting from that. And the exposure that I do have is limited to, very
It's
specific
niche, isn't
types
it?
of
Yeah.
audiences. Yeah. So I don't know what it is. I really don't. It's confusing to me.
Does that story of people seeing you on crafts though disconcert you? Because it would if it was me. It would like, hold on. So, is there something really nefarious or stuff I'm not aware of going on behind the scenes that then affects your life? Because then, I, presumably, after people have said that to you, you're then thinking, shit, am I really on these crafts? What am I doing? What's going on? Do you think like that or not?
Doesn't bother me at all.
Oh,
That's what I'll
wow.
say.
It would for me.
Yeah, it doesn't bother me. Um, because I know about the subtlety of consciousness and I know about the subtlety of memory. I also know that aliens of different types have a very, very interesting to capacity, either through their technology or through their ability to, I'm guessing, mentally manipulate frequencies. They can, as I'm sure you know, they create screen memories or
Hmm.
delete memories. So it just doesn't, I leave that as an open-ended thing. Yeah, it's possible. It's sure. Does it bother me? No. I mean, I would like to be I'd like to be in on this. If it involves me, I think I'd like to know about it.
Well, that's the thing that would disconcert me. There's stuff I've done that I'm not consciously aware of, or stuff I've been party to, should I say. And then I would be constantly not worrying, but thinking about that time rather than focusing on the now.
Well, let me tell you something. I think that I know many, many people who have been abducted by various aliens and stuff. I'm a co-director of the Institute for Exoconsciousness, and
Yes.
that deals with people who are experiencers, and many experiencers do have experience being on craft, either good or bad, whatever. And knowing some of them and the fear levels that they have gone through, and pain levels also, not all of them. It's almost, in some respects, I think it's a blessing not to have the memory, if there is a legitimate memory.
Mm, yes. Yes. But that's why I'd rather nobody tell me if I have been on the crafts and that all that stuff might have happened to me. I don't want them telling me I've been there because then I can be blissfully ignorant of that pain and or fear. You see what I mean? And
Yeah,
that's where someone telling you would
yeah.
be disconcerting. But you've not been rocked by it, which I would say is fair play to you.
I'm not rocked by really much of anything. I have explored my own fears in many, many ways, but particularly through all this sort of psychic exploration that I've done. And what's interesting to me is that I've learned over the years that I would say men in particular are more frightened of this stuff than women. I mean, really frightened. Like the guys are all set to go in and get, blown up in war, but they're really not. It's almost like they're more afraid of this stuff. This stuff, there are angles on it. Yeah, it should absolutely frighten everybody. That's why I took my time exploring all these things because I understand that. And unlike a lot of people, I know that there are very serious negative influences in all aspects of the paranormal world and the UFO world. So I'm okay with that. The only thing that ever truly was, yeah, I think it was frightening. I'm going to say frightening. Was a time I had put up in my bedroom what I call a spiritual perimeter. I had spirits in my house, uh, and I was fine with them. They can hang out, they can do whatever they want to, but I just didn't want them in my room because that's where I go to sleep.
Sure.
So I put up a spiritual perimeter. I'm not a big believer in rituals or stuff, props, salt, uh, cards, things like that. I just don't. I believe in your own inner strength. And nothing ever got through. I said, you guys, you can go anywhere else, not here. Nothing ever got through except for once a spirit of a cat, which walked all over my bed while my other cat was there and asleep. And the one that was very disconcerting, I was sleeping and got woken up just by, I'm a very light sleeper, something. And I was on my side. It was roughly almost a little higher than face to face. I would say it was about 3.5 feet tall. It was extremely nondescript. And the closest thing I could ever associate it with would be I don't know if you all got the Addams Family TV series. Okay, so Cousin It.
Oh, aye. Yeah.
So just this kind of weird, it was brown, kind of hairy looking, just weird. It didn't, I've read about all the different species. This did not look like anything like any of them. The only thing that correlated was the fact that it was 3.5 feet tall. And immediately, as soon as my eyes are open, I'm looking at this. I had the most intense experience of doom. I mean, horrifying, horrifying, like nothing I've ever experienced in my life. And as I said, I don't scare easily. And simply because there was some weird thing standing next to me and I wake up and I see it would not be enough to scare me. I just don't get
Really?
scared.
Whoa.
Yeah, no, I'm in that realm, I'm fearless. And whatever this was, my sense of like, oh my God, oh, it was sort of like that. And I'm thinking, well, that sensation of doom, which is the closest thing I can think of to describe it, that didn't belong to me. That was not mine. So therefore, if it wasn't mine, I think it was being injected by that thing, that entity. Um, and I have read since, not prior, since, that there it is suspected that there are some types of ETs that like to, in fact, cause, or in my words, sort of inject into a human some type of intense emotion because they feed off of it emotionally, vicariously.
Mm.
And that made sense to me. At any rate, I immediately started praying. I didn't know what else to do. I mean, and I was so doomed out in my head. I was just, it wasn't even like a regular prayer. It was just like, oh God, help, help, help. One of those. And then, boom, it was gone. And the sensation was gone. Everything was gone.
So would you put that down to an alien thing or some measure of spiritual demonic sort of thing? Where would your mind go?
Well, I wrote about that also, and I got another book, How to Talk to an Alien, and I talk about ET languages, and I did talk about the relationship between ETs, angels, and demons, which I think historically now people are starting to kind of get with it and get that picture. And if you understand that spiritual entities, either, ultra, intra, extra, multidimensional, whatever, that they can manifest quasi-physically sometimes, or sometimes remain 100% sort of in the spiritual realm, that some of them are negative. Certainly the government is coming out now and saying, yep, some are good, some are bad. It took them a heck of a long time even to get that far because military is pretty much just focused on, well, if they're entering our airspace and without a permission, they're bad. Well, which is not really logical, but that's the military doing its job.
Yeah, like the aliens give a shit about our lines on a map. Do you know what I mean? They don't, do they?
Well, there's that. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It's like they're. I've spoken to Steve Mirror a few times, and he says it's the paranormal is one thing, just wearing different costumes or different disguises. So
Oh,
that, in
sure.
theory, is what that was. It was just putting on a costume at that point to manifest this brown weird thing.
Yeah.
What a
I agree with
swine!
that.
Yeah, yeah, naughty, naughty. Is it all a designed plan? Do you think the whole alien or paranormal topic? Are we pawns in the game of advancement, or are we willing participants in it? Because if you look at your involvement, in theory, you've been abducted and taught, you say, on crafts by them. Are you a
No,
pawn,
no,
or are
no,
you
no.
agreeing to it?
I was teaching. I was teaching the humans on the craft.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the weird thing.
Yeah. So are
I
you a
wasn't
willing participant, or are you a pawn in the game?
a pawn would you're implying that it's an us against them if you're using the word pawn.
All right. That yeah, it has that connotation. But let's just say, are you willingly being involved in whatever's going on, or are you unwittingly being used in whatever's going on? Do you think?
Do you really listen? It, our governments at this point can inject words into your brain. They
Mm,
know how to do that. Okay? So the question and they can do that and you'll have no idea whether it was your thought or their thought.
I don't like that.
Exactly. But we're already there. Humans are there. So it's in my mind it's almost pointless to try and figure out, that if you're talking about us versus them, you're kind of using the idea that every man is an island and that we have total control over whatever it is that goes on inside this little capsule here, which I don't believe, and I just don't believe it. I mean, we're all interconnected. That's how I can access, anybody else or anything else, and I've done that before. I've done that with. I actually did that with ETs, which is kind of interesting because somebody came to me with a. This was a guy who was terrified of an abduction and wanted to know more about it. And I gave him information about what they had brought with them, how they flew in, how many craft, and some very specific information. You know, and I was seeing it from their perspective in their cockpit,
Nice.
which is interesting because you would
Yeah.
say to yourself, I mean, any logical person would say to yourself, "Oh, are you kidding me? That that's you can't do that." And yeah, you can. It's just not going to feel like you are doing it in the normal sense of the word. But yes, you can access the information.
So that adds weight to your that everything is connected because
Everything
it's
is
on the same
connected.
web, so to speak.
Yeah. And information can be the brain is nothing but a filter. The brain is just a block on our access to consciousness. That's all it is. And so, in that respect, we've already physiologically been corrupted. Do you know what I mean?
Because we're already part of whatever's already there. So it's
Yeah,
irrelevant us. Yeah,
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 yeah. So I don't see this us them thing going on.
yeah. But there is something going on though. That's the weird thing because obviously they're doing stuff and we're involved in it. So there's something going on. It's just what,
But
and you
many,
know, all your research, right, and looking at all the people you've spoken to and stuff. What do you think the reasoning for that contact is, or for the abductions, however we want to term it? What what would you put your money on?
well, I mean, I think I I don't I'm not a big fan of speculating.
Okay,
Um,
fair enough.
okay. So I can only base on some of my observations over the years. And I think certainly, if you read any of David Jacobs' books about abductions and the medical exams and all that. Now, I know people who have gone through those, and they've experienced some of them excruciatingly painful. Others no. I know somebody claims her entire eyeball was taken out of her head while she's on that flat metal thing, and they did whatever they did. She was fine with that. Didn't bother her. So some people bother, some people it doesn't.
Mm,
Um, uh, in all cases that I've seen, none of those particular species or whatever you want to call them seem to have empathy. That's a big thing that's missing. Now, that can be incredibly disturbing to somebody. It's like when you go to the doctor and, you show up and they say, "Yeah, we're going to do surgery on you now." And you say, "But wait, can you explain?" Nope, and you're already it's kind of like that. It's awful. I mean, and it's a violation of
mm.
what we believe to be our sovereign consciousness. But I also know others who they had what you would call abductions, yeah, who were told that, for example, their eyes are being used like you would use a camera to report information back to the ship.
I see.
Um,
Whoa.
Others are doing so-called abductions for purposes of saying, "Hey guys, wake up. You know, this is what the future looks like, and it's not so rosy unless you guys clean up your act now because you're running out of time," which is a gift. That knowledge is a gift, and I wish more people knew that. So I think that the purposes are kind of all over the place for these abductions, and I do think that it relates to different groups of non-human entities or intelligences, whatever you want to call them.
Yeah, the old classic of Earth doom, you know, and like you know, look after your planet essentially, and the waking up. Two big things I hear again a lot from people, and it's interesting you see that as a gift. Certainly the climatey sort of stuff, you know, looking after your Earth as a gift. It's an interesting word with that, which leads me to this very next question, which is a lot of experiencers seem to come back from their UFO experience with a gift,
Mm.
or was it already there and they were just turned on or reawakened that gift? Do you know what I mean? So
Mhm.
a lot of people say they come back and now are psychic.
Mhm.
Now that didn't necessarily happen to you, or did it?
Mhm. No, no, no. Like everything in my life, I had to learn it the hard way. I'd spend,
No easy
I'd
path for
spend
you, yeah.
no easy path. I had to spend years and years training and doubting and being skeptical and, trying new stuff and seeing what that means in relation to that. No, I didn't have like instant, I wish I had. Really pathetic way. I have sometimes thought, gee, it's not fair. All these other people, they have their near-death experiences and they come back like these psychic geniuses. Yeah, how come I didn't get that? And I think, no, Nancy, better not. No, don't. That's not a thing you really want to wish for.
No, no, certainly not some of the stories I've heard. No, no, no,
Yeah.
no. So, did you get from your experiences on board crafts? Did you get any other gifts that you've that are not necessarily the psychic side of things? Is there anything else that you would put down to being a gift?
You mean from other people?
From
Because I have no recollection. So, as far as
oh
I know,
yeah,
I've
I'm okay.
never, other than being, I've had I believe, one dream where I was ever on a craft. And it was interesting because well, this craft seemed to have sort of an elevator, which seems ridiculous, but it had. And so I was in this sort of elevator being led to the next higher level, and a small, sort of a type of a gray got into the elevator at the last second, slipped in, and it was very tiny, it was very skinny, and it had much more of a charcoal color skin than I had ever read about or heard about. And it sort of shrank away into the corner when it looked at me like it was afraid of me, which I've never heard anybody talk about that before. But uh, so we got to the next level, and then I encounter many different species. Now, other than that one dream, and I
Mm.
sometimes it's just a dream, it's just a dream. Um, I don't know. I'm a lucid dreamer. I have been since I was 8, but I don't know what that was. But other than that, no, never been on a spacecraft. Do I think there are other gifts? The other gifts might be, yeah, to create friendships. To people have been given certainly, mathematical algorithms and solutions to engineering or scientific or technological problems. That's a gift,
Mm.
certainly, even as much as if you hand over, like in the Corso theory of handing over the actual technologies to certain governments anyway, that then trickle them down. Another gift would be people have told me about being piloted, being taught how to pilot. So that's kind of a gift. That's kind of a nifty thing, you
It
know.
is. Do you know what? Of all the things I've spoken to people about, that's the one that makes me think not, or sorry, more skeptically than anything else is that one. Because I've heard stories of people who said, yeah, they were trained to be a pilot for an event that's coming and you will be needed, and then they
Mhm.
died. So how they're not there for that event that's coming unless it's on a different plane or something again of existence.
So you're going much more into this sort of Jacques Vallée world of there's something fraudulent or intangible about the entire ET UFO phenomena.
No, I completely believe in every way that the UFO phenomenon is real. The only thing I'm skeptical about is that people are being taught to pilot their craft when a lot of people come out and say, I'm taught to pilot a craft, and then 10 years down the line, they've died and they're
Listen,
not there for this craft. That's the
I,
weird thing I don't get.
I'm totally with you. And that bothers me too. And
Mm.
if you go back into UFO history, you'll see that, I think these cases are more like 100, 150 years ago. But some of the first people who had these actual ET encounters, allegedly, and were given special knowledge, and and told you have to do this, you have for the community, you have to, and they go and they do everything, and it's the ETs leave them, and they're left kind of holding the bag, saying, "Well, why did I devote my life to this? What was going on? I was promised something, very clearly promised." So there's an element of deception, and you can
Mm.
go straight into the whole trickster, theory on that too.
I see what you mean. So yeah, it wasn't relating to me. It was related to the whole side of UFO, which is the deception from their part, not from us looking at it. Yeah, no, I get it. Um, I think it's time before we wrap this up, because I'm conscious of time, that we enter the Koit zone. Koit zone. So Nancy, I'm going to ask you some random questions now that have nothing to do whatsoever with any of the topics we've just discussed. So just answer best
Okay.
you can. So bacon. Yes, bacon.
Eggs,
How do you like
egg,
bacon cooked?
crispy.
Correct. Big tick against your name there. Well done. What was the last concert you went to?
Uh, oh, hold on. No, he's not up there. He was Jethro Tull in the band Jethro Tull. He
Hmm.
was Ian Anderson's like right hand. Martin. Martin, what the heck is his name? I forget. Dang it.
But Martin, anyway, you saw Martin.
Oh, he's fabulous. He was fabulous. I just saw him and I was shocked he showed up here in Connecticut.
Quality. I'll look it up because I genuinely don't know. So Martin from Jethro Tull.
Martin
I will
Barr.
look. Martin Barr, did you say?
Yeah, he's great.
Ah, there you go. Quality. What sport were or are you best at?
I could have been probably good at anything, but I'm not athletic and it does not interest me.
No, that's fair play. I like the way you said that though. I would have been good at it if you'd have put your mind to it.
No, I know that, yeah, I'm coordinated, but I just could care less.
Fair. I like it. No, that's cool. I like that. When no one is around and you're listening to music, do you ever find yourself dancing around or singing into a hairbrush?
Hairbrush?
Yeah.
No, no, because that implies a spotlight. I don't want a spotlight when I'm dancing.
I know I've done it before. I've had a remote control or sometimes a hairbrush. Not that you'd think it nowadays, but yeah. Just and then you look at yourself thinking, "What am I doing?" I just wondered if you were the same.
Well, yeah, you're doing like a Tom Cruise imitation.
Tom Cruise or Tom Jones?
Cruise. That was his very first
Oh yes, yes,
movie.
yes, yes. I know what you mean. Yes, now I got it. The image went right
Yeah.
into my head then. Do you have a favorite pot or pan for cooking?
I think I used to, and I think it got so badly beat up that I had to get rid of it.
Good work. Use it till it's destroyed is one of my mottos. Saves waste. No, no, it's spending. Do you have a favorite chocolate or sweet?
Yeah, all of them,
As many as you can fit into your drawer as possible. Yeah,
pretty much. Yeah.
good work. Um, Now, this one may not apply to you, but it's interesting that I wrote it for you. What scares you the most?
Uh, I don't know. I mean, I think what scares me the most is worrying about death. If death, because I love living. I
Nice.
absolutely adore living, and I've been blessed with quite a good life, I think. And I like who I am. I like the place that I've been put into. And so the thought of losing that, yeah, that scares me.
Wow. I would not have expected that, Nancy, because someone who's you might is connected to spirit and all that might would always say, "No, I don't care, and I'll move on and I'll enjoy that." Well done for
Yeah.
you for rocking the norm again. I like that. I like that a lot. Because I think the same way, by the way. I don't want to
Yeah.
die.
Yeah. Yeah.
But death doesn't scare me in any way, but I don't I like me and I wouldn't want to. Yeah.
Yeah.
Weird,
Well,
isn't it?
and if you do, have you done past life regressions?
I haven't. No, I would be interested in that, doing that. I don't want to do UFO regression stuff though,
Why?
because of what I told you earlier about being scared of that whole scenario. I don't want to know. Best being ignorant to that.
Really?
Yeah, seriously.
No,
Because
no,
it's
no,
it's the whole do I want to open up to myself to some measure of trauma that in theory I've forgotten? Do I want to open that can of worms? No, but a past life regression is different because I probably enjoy that, I think.
no. Your chances of opening up a traumatic can of worms would be more with a past life regression than with an ET experience.
My brain says the opposite on that, but I'll take your word as the expert. But it worries me a bit.
It's like we get numbed on both sides of this lifetime. So we're numbed to the traumas of before and after. Okay. We just have this lifetime to kind of deal with whatever this lifetime is handing to us. And you can expand your experience of it, you can contract your experience of it. For me, I am horrifically curious about everything. I have to know, and I would prefer to know about the bad stuff because I also have this probably stupid thought in my head that if I understand something, I'll be able to control it somehow.
And that's exactly right, by the way. That is the right mentality because fear is just an irrational thing sometimes that prevents you from exploring something, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So I get it, but I don't. I wouldn't want to open up myself to a weirdness. But the past life thing does interest me because I do like the historical aspect thing, and then almost in a way proving that there is something bigger than me.
For sure.
So I would love that. Is an interesting question. Bruises, leave them alone or sometimes press them to get sensation? And I love that question.
That's interesting. What made you think of that?
I don't know. I write every question right specifically for the person I'm interested interviewing. They just come to me, random ones.
Okay, so I'm going to help you now
Okay.
because you need to know this about you, I think.
Okay.
Which is, I literally yesterday, I when I woke up, I noticed a bruise, and it's a really pretty ugly looking bruise, pretty, kind of dark-ish. It's about the size of what would you have? Well, I'm gonna say it's smaller than a quarter, bigger than a dime, if you
Okay.
know American currency.
I do. My girlfriend's American.
Well, there you go. Um, and it was so peculiar because I didn't do anything to earn that bruise. And it's not the first one I've had. I thought, what the heck is that? I even got in touch with my daughter, sent her a picture yesterday. What is that bruise? She said, well, what do you think? I mean, you think this is like an ET thing? I said, look, I don't know. I don't know. All I know is it wasn't, I've gotten a bunch of these over the years through absolutely no cause I can figure out. So there you go. So what was your question?
It was pertinent anyway. Is the point now? Yeah. My is rather trivial question now is: do you like to press them to feel them, or do you just leave them alone?
No, I don't. Are you kidding? I mean, a
No.
bruise is a bruise is usually, and I was touching it to see if this was lumpy or bumpy or anything. It's completely smooth. So do I touch them for like, no. But your question here, what what I want you to know is I think that you were tuned in to a very recent experience of me over here in something that is completely off the wall. That's how psychic stuff works.
Yeah.
You didn't put a limitation on it. You just said, okay, I'm going wherever this takes me. And you came up with something so specific that I could identify in terms of a sequence of in time that it was specific to me, which means you tapped into me.
And you wouldn't be the first person to say that because I've come up with so many random ones with so many people, and they also say a story similar to what you've said, which is it's so apt when I say them. So it is
Right.
it's weird, but I like it at the same time.
Well, okay, but so consider if you haven't already, I don't know, that you are on this what I call this information superhighway. So it's worthwhile to have it evolve, make more of it, and not just oh yeah, that was weird kind of thing.
Yeah, no, I get
It's a
what you
real
mean.
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's put it this way, it's in my family.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I could go that route should I want to. I don't. I've never felt a desire to do it. I don't know if you have to feel a desire to do it, but I've just never opened myself up to that side of things.
Well, it won't happen if you don't open yourself up to a way of thinking. That's all it is, a
Yeah,
style of thinking.
sure. Food for thought for my brain. I'm going to leave you with the one final Coit Zone question, which is: you are offered a one-way trip on an ET craft to their home world, but it's one way, mind. Are you going?
Oh my God.
Mm.
Depends how badly we blow up this planet.
Okay, from the purpose of my question, I was just thinking you're escaping your life right now. So let's just say it's right now. would you go? Would you leave everything?
I'm a very cautious person. Um, I don't take risks without making sure I have covered, all of the potential risks. So that is, I can't answer that because that's way too specific. I would need to know. But yeah, I mean, would I go? Would I absolutely say no? No, no, I would find out. Of course, it's an adventure. My whole life is, you don't know anything about my life. My life has been nothing but nonstop adventure. So, yeah, I like adventure.
Fair play to you. Well played. That is the end of the Koit Zone. So sorry for taking you through that random random journey,
No,
but
no, no, that
everyone
was
has to.
interesting.
Right, which leaves us two final questions before we finish, which is what else do you like to do in your downtime? Any activities or guilty pleasures?
Do they have to be guilty?
You don't have to be. Any pleasures you want. Be clean.
Okay, well, um,
That means you can't say anything now.
no, I like reading. I love reading. That's a guilty pleasure.
Excellent, excellent stuff. And the final thing is on our question list today, what are you currently working on? Is there a project you're...
Yeah, I'm working on multiple projects. I'm working on this week. I'm launching a TSP remote viewing program, 7-week program, specifically for people on the autistic spectrum. And I've been working on that for about 3 years now. I'm working now, I've put together a team who'd be working on this course. I've got a psychologist and a high functioning autistic guy who his specialty is tarot reading.
Oh, nice.
And so I'm working on that TSP program. If you know of anybody who might be interested, go to my website, which is theskepticalpsychic.com. I've got, sign up stuff there. I limited the class to about 6 people, so it's very tiny. And it is the launch, and I've got a special price thing going on that. I'm working also on a with let's see, I'm working on a streaming film series, which has to do with actually your country and some has to do with an adventure, but with actual, we've got several extremely high level scientists as advisors on this series. And so we're just about the point, we just finished off the first few episodes. We're looking for investors, we're talking to some people, and, music is involved. So, and I know you're a musician, some pretty high level people involved in that as well. And we hope to get that moving very, very soon. So that's imminent, within the next couple of weeks.
Excellent. So a shrouded in secrecy, cagey project is coming. And I appreciate you can't always say things, so that's fair.
I can't because no, I can't.
You don't need to, that's
And you
fine.
have to. You have to, by the way, because in that particular business, like the music business, it's a little bit on the cutthroat side, and you do have to be careful.
Keep it
And
stum.
it's highly, highly creative. And I do think
Excellent.
this is gonna be magnificent. This project. I'm very, very excited about it.
Excellent stuff. So thank you to Nancy today. Thank you ever so much, Nancy, by the way, for coming on. Much appreciated. For everyone watching, check out the links in the description to everything Nancy's already mentioned. Anyway, links are below to her sites and all her socials, etc. So check those out. Thank you ever so much for everyone watching today, and thank you finally again to you, Nancy. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Cheers. To watch other KoitCast episodes, please click the image top left. To subscribe to my channel, please click the image top right. Please like and share to help KoitCast grow, and most importantly of all, please click the notification bell so you never miss an upload.